A knock came at the cabin door just as Prudence Blythe drew her last loaf from the oven, and she stood a moment with the hot pan balanced on her folded apron, listening the way the blind learned to listen. Not the wind, not the loose shingle that had rattled since her husband died. A man's weight on her porch boards, shifting, uncertain, and the tired blow of a horse beyond him. "Whoever you are," she called, "you'll forgive me if I don't rush. My eyes went out with the fever 3 winters back, and I've learned not to hurry into a room I can't see. No hurry, ma'am." The voice was low and worn thin, the voice of a man who had been a long time on the trail, and longer without kindness. "I saw your smoke. I've got money enough for a meal. If you've got one to sell, I'll not lie to you and say I'm not near the end of my rope." Prudence set the pan on the trivet and wiped her hands. She knew the state of her own larder better than any sighted woman knew hers, for she counted every ounce with her fingers. 1 loaf, a rind of cheese gone hard, 3 potatoes with eyes on them. It was all that stood between her and the mercy of a valley that had mostly forgotten a blind widow lived at the end of the hazel road. "I've no meal to sell," she said, and heard his breath go out. "But I've bread just baked, and I'll not send a hungry man off my porch to say a Blythe let him starve. Come in. Mind the churn to your left." The man came in careful, and she heard him take off his hat, which told her something. She cut the loaf clean across the middle, the crust crackling under the knife, and pushed the larger half toward the sound of him. "That's your loaf," he said. "Your whole loaf, near about." "It's half a loaf," she answered, "and a half given is worth more than a whole kept. Eat." Court Latham ate. He had not meant to take so much. He had ridden into Hazel Valley 3 days back, with a made-up name and a borrowed horse, and a coat he'd bought off a drifter for $1, because a man who owned as much land as he had come to own could never learn the truth of a place by riding in as himself. Folks smiled at money. He wanted to see who smiled at a ragged stranger with empty pockets. He had his answer now, and it shamed him, for the only door in the whole valley that had opened to him was the door of a woman who could not even see the rags she was feeding. "You're kind to a fault, ma'am," he said around the bread. "I'm kind to my own conscience," Prudence said, easing into the chair across from him. "Kindness costs me a supper. Cruelty would cost me my sleep, and I sleep little enough as it is." He looked at her then, really looked, the way a man looks when no one can catch him at it. She was not young. Grief and hard work had drawn lines at her mouth, and her dress had been turned and mended so many times the blue had gone near to gray. Her clouded eyes rested somewhere past his shoulder. And yet she sat straight as a fence post, and she poured him coffee from a pot she found by touch, without spilling a drop, and there was in the whole plain room a dignity that all his acres had never once bought him. "How does a woman alone hold a place like this?" he asked. "Poorly," she admitted, and there was no self-pity in it, only fact. "The bank holds the note. Mr. Ashby holds the bank. He's told me twice this spring that a blind widow has no business on good bottomland, and that he'd be doing me a Christian favor to buy the place out from under me and see me settled in town. He says it's soft, but I know what soft can hide. My Thomas trusted a soft voice once, and it's why the note exists at all." Court set down his cup. "This Ashby, he mean to have your land. He means to have the whole valley, I think," she said. "A little at a time. The way a man eats an apple, I'm one of the last bites." She smiled, though it cost her. "Now you've had my bread and my troubles both, and you've paid for neither. Rest by the fire tonight if you've nowhere. The barn's sound. In the morning you'll go on, and I'll have done one good thing this month." "You've a low opinion of the valley," he said. "I've a fair opinion of it," she corrected him gently. "Fair means seeing the whole of a thing. There's good in Hazel. The Pruitts brought me a ham at Christmas, and the school teacher reads me my letters when there are any, which is seldom. But good that has to be asked for isn't the same as good that comes to the door. When my eyes went, most folks decided I was a trouble to be managed, not a woman to be visited. They're not cruel. They're only busy, and a blind widow is easy to set down and forget, the way you set down a thing in a dark room and stop thinking of it." She turned the coffee cup slowly in her hands. "You'll think me bitter. I'm not. I've a roof, and my 2 hands and bread in the oven most weeks. A body can build a whole life out of less than folks imagine, but I'll own it's a quiet life, and quiet has its weight. Court thought of his own house east of the rail, the big empty one with the good rugs and the men he paid to keep it, and how quiet that was too, in its way, for all its size. He did not say so. A man in a dollar coat had no business owning a house with rugs, and he was not ready yet to stop being the man in the coat. He slept in her barn, and he did not sleep much. He lay in the sweet rot smell of old hay and listened to the horse he'd borrowed shift in the dark, and he turned over in his mind everything the woman had said, and everything the valley had not said to a stranger it took for poor. He had made his fortune reading men, reading the small tells of what they wanted and what they feared, buying low where others saw nothing, holding fast where others sold. He had believed, for a long time, that this was a kind of wisdom. Lying in Prudence Blythe's hay, he began to suspect it was only a kind of loneliness, dressed up in ledgers. She had read him too, that evening, read him truer than any banker ever had, and she had done it blind, with nothing to go on but the sound of a tired man and the manners he showed her. What she had found, she had fed. He could not remember the last time anyone had simply fed him, expecting nothing back. Before first light he saddled up. He left a folded bill under the water pitcher where she'd find it with her fingers, and then he thought better of it and took it back, because he understood, now, that money laid down in the dark would only shame her. Some debts a man could not pay with a bill. He rode out east, toward the rail and the telegraph, and the offices where men who did not know his rough coat knew his name very well indeed. The ride gave him 3 days to think, and he spent them the way a man spends the last of something he means to change. He thought about the note the woman couldn't read, and the man who'd counted on that. He thought about how a place like Hazel Valley got eaten, not in one bite, but the way Prudence had said it, a little at a time, a soft voice, and a due date, and a widow, with no one to read the fine print. Ashby had done nothing a court would call theft, likely, only the ordinary slow cruelty of a man who took what the weak couldn't hold. Court had made his money among such men. He knew every move Ashby would make before Ashby made it, because he had watched 100 Ashbys, and God forgive him, had once or twice been half of one himself. But he had never before had a reason to stand on the other side of it. He had one now. Her name was Prudence Blythe, and she had cut him the larger half of her only loaf, and he found he could not ride east fast enough to make it right. By the time he reached the offices, he was himself again, clean-shaven, in the good coat, with the name that opened doors. He spent a week and a good deal of money, and none of it felt like money spent. It felt like a debt paid. Prudence found the barn empty and the pitcher untouched, and she stood in the cold doorway a while, telling herself it was foolish to feel the loss of a stranger she'd known one night. But the cabin was quieter for his being gone, and she had grown so used to quiet that she had stopped noticing it until, for one evening, it had been broken. The weeks turned. Mr. Ashby came, as she had known he would, with his soft voice and his papers she could not read. He sat in her one good chair and told her the note had come due, that he was sorry, that the world was hard on a woman with no eyes and no man, and that he had brought the sheriff's own clerk to make it lawful and gentle. He put a pen in her hand and guided it toward a line. "I'd sooner sign nothing," Prudence said, "until it's read to me by someone who isn't paid to see me off my own porch." "There's no one else, Mrs. Blythe," Ashby said, patient as a snake. "There's only me." "There's me," said a voice from the doorway, and Prudence knew it before her heart could catch up to her ears. The ragged rider, but not ragged now. The boots that crossed her floor were good boots, and the voice had lost its trail-worn thinness and come into something square and certain. "Who in blazes are you?" Ashby demanded. "Court Latham." He let the name sit there, and Prudence heard Ashby's chair scrape as the man came to his feet too fast. "I believe you've done business with my company out of Cheyenne, the one that holds the paper on your bank, Mr. Ashby, as of the 9th of this month, and on a good deal of what your bank thought it held." A rustle of documents laid on the table, heavy ones, official ones. "I bought the valley, all of it. including this note, which I find was written crooked and called due early, which is a thing the courts take a hard view of. The room had gone very still. Prudence gripped the arms of her chair. "You'll want to be off Mrs. Blythe's land," Court said, and though his voice never rose, something in it moved Ashby toward the door like a hand at his collar. "And you'll want to be a long way from Hazel Valley by the time I've read every crooked page you've filed. Go on." The soft man went, and he was not soft going. The door shut, and Prudence sat in the ringing quiet, with her heart going like a hammer, and she turned her clouded eyes toward where the rider stood. "You came back," she said. "I said I'd done one good thing that month," Court answered, low. "Turned out you'd done it, ma'am, not me. You fed a man you took for a beggar and asked him for nothing. I've been rich a long while, Mrs. Blythe, and in all that time not one soul opened a door to me, and not to my money. You did. You couldn't see the money, so you saw the man." His boots came closer, and then she heard him kneel, so that his voice came up to her from below, the way a man speaks when he means every word. "I came back owning the whole valley. I came back to lay it at your feet." "I can't see a valley," Prudence whispered. "Then I'll be your eyes for it," he said. "The bottomland's green as anything this year. There's a colt in the low pasture would eat out of your hand. The note's burned. I did that this morning, so you'd owe no man for your own roof. It's yours, free and clear, and it's yours whether you'll have me or not. But I'm asking you to have me." A pause, and she felt his rough hand come to rest, light as asking, over her folded ones. "I've got no soft voice to charm you with. I'm gruff, and I've been alone, and I've forgotten how to be gentle. But I'd learn it back for you. I'd read to you every night of my life. I'd cut the bread." Prudence Blythe had learned, over 3 dark winters, to know a true thing by its weight, the way she knew a true loaf by its heft in her hands. And the hand over hers was warm, and it was not soft, and it did not tremble. She turned her palm up beneath his, and closed her fingers around it. "You'll cut it even," she said, and her voice broke on a laugh that was half a sob. "Half for you, and half for me. That's the only way I'll have it in this house." "Even," he agreed, and she felt him bow his head over their joined hands. "Every loaf, the rest of our lives." They were married in the Hazel church that fall, and if the valley had once forgotten a blind widow at the end of a bad road, it did not forget her now, for she was the wife of the man who owned every acre they walked, and she wore it as lightly as she wore her mended shawl. Court Latham was as good as his rough word. He read to her by the fire on the long nights, the newspaper and the book, and once, all one winter, a fat novel that made her laugh, doing the voices badly. He named the colt for her, and set her hand on its neck the first day it would stand for stroking. And every evening of his life, when the bread came hot from the oven, he cut it clean across the middle and laid the larger half in her waiting hands, and she pushed it back toward him, and they argued over it, gentle and glad, the way a man and a woman argue when there is no longer any hunger in the house, but the good kind that is answered every day. He had ridden into the valley a stranger to find out who its people truly were. He had found only one who mattered, and she had never seen his face at all, only felt the truth of him, and fed it, and been fed in turn. Prudence would say, in her old age, that she had given away her only loaf on a cold night to a beggar, and that the beggar had come back and set a whole green valley in her lap. But that was not the part she held closest. The part she held closest was smaller and warmer, and hers alone, that in a world that had smiled only at his money, she had opened her door to the man, and the man had come home,